biggest problem we have in America today is that we did not prepare for success. The rich in our country now take home more money than the middle class do every year. Why is that? What happened? Didn't used to be the case. We used to have a robust middle class. Now we have a shrinking. In fact, we have a shrunk middle class. Well, what's going on there? How is it the bosses collectively take home more money than the people who actually get things done? Well, let's use a hypothetical example. Let's say there is a company which is required to maintain its profits to make 100 gears a day. And that company has one boss and two employees, for the sake of this, keeping it simple. Each of those employees then is making 50 gears a day. A machine comes along. It's a gear maker. One employee is required to run it, and that machine can produce 100 gears a day. The boss will use their built-up money to purchase the machine, and then they'll look at their employees and say, we don't need two people running this thing, and we only need 100 gears a day. You're fired, John. Jim, you are now expected to work your same 40 hours a week to collect the same pay that you always did. And John, you're out of luck. That's because the means of production, that gear-making machine, that's owned by the boss. The people have chosen, as in you and me, through our voting, we have chosen to have no say in what happens with that machine. That is what we need to change. We need to put rules on the means of production, also known as well-regulated capitalism. We need to put rules that say, when technology develops in this way, you cannot merely kick out the old employees. You cannot just demand more output from your new employees. They have to be compensated. This is how we are going to push America forward.
For the last kind of couple of hundred years, there's been this overlap between what makes capitalists rich and what gives us as a society the capacity to produce more stuff. Capitalists will usually argue that this is a kind of an eternal feature of capitalism, and it's the only way it can be, and we have to carry on with this because it's been so good. But actually, it's kind of we should see that as a historically situated confluence between those two things, between what is good for capitalists and what is good for society. It's not always good for society. It's not good for anyone in society by any means, but it certainly has given us the ability to produce as much stuff as we need. Our problems historically have been we don't have enough stuff. Now we have plenty, we kind of have an abundance, and it doesn't feel like it to many people in the world. But then, partly that's because the poorest 3.5 billion people in the world have the same wealth as the richest 26 people in the world. So this terribly unequal distribution is something that needs addressing. But in terms of the productive capacity, we now have, we throw away 28% of the food we produce, but at the same time, 9 million people starve to death every year. So our problem isn't that we're not making enough food or anything else. Our problem is that we have a system in which capitalism is just incapable of distributing what we can produce to the people who need it. Because if the people who need food don't have any money to pay for it, and the capitalism isn't going to provide it to them, it will just throw the food away instead. So capitalism has got us to this position.
We should say, this argument this argument is predicated on the notion that we can all agree people should not be starving to death. Right. Well, yeah, I mean, but I don't I think there are people who are sort of like, well, if they don't have the money, but amongst non-sociopathic people, theoretically, we should be living in a world where the only hindrance to feeding everybody would be capacity, as opposed to the way that we've decided to distribute it.
We are not in Gene Roddenberry's socialist utopia yet, but we're also not living in 1938 when the 40-hour work week was determined to be the amount of work a person had to do to earn a living. Half the population wasn't allowed to work, and computers were the size of a bus. Many of our problems exist only because the American worker is competing against their own tools as people try to stay relevant while automation replaces whole industries left and right. We need to begin the transition. That could take the form of decreasing the amount of hours that are considered full-time, or we could lower the age of retirement. Or we could begin a universal basic income. Or we could nationalize industries like energy or internet providers. Or we could do a combination of all these things, so long as it scales with increased productivity. Whichever we decide is best, we'll take the same route to get there: industry regulation and higher taxes on the rich. Regulation is what forces capitalists to only profit off of things that benefit people, while deregulation allows capitalists to profit off things that harm people. Higher taxes on the ultra-rich keeps the greediest among us from hoarding the benefits of our labor, while disincentivizing financial crime. After all, why would Bernie Madoff steal another billion if he's going to lose 90% of it in taxes? Start with regulations that ensure that what is profitable for a business is also good for the country. That means strict environmental regulations and much stronger tax laws. It would not only pull people out of poverty, it would be good for capitalism itself. Regulations are what stop a CEO of a chair manufacturing company from cutting down the whole forest because they're retiring in 10 years and they don't care that there will be no wood for the company to make chairs out of in 20 years. At the same time, we need to deal with the theft of American wealth by billionaires. This can be handled by raising taxes on the ultra-wealthy to pay for government services and infrastructure. If you're worried about the specter of socialism, don't be. Existing socially funded groups are police, firefighters, military. We fund the roads socially. Things that, for the most part, we agree that we all may require at some point. Stronger regulations on capitalism and fair taxes on the ultra-rich would allow us to catch up with countries like Canada, Norway, and England with Medicare for All, which, by the way, would be a cheaper way for all Americans to get health care. Toss in free adult education, and the United States could be on the upswing again on the world stage instead of the laughingstock it has become. Here's the definition of socialism: a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production should be regulated by the community as a whole, as opposed to private ownership. Note that it's the means of production, not the product. The product is privately owned. In other words, a farmer can sell the wheat that they grew because that's what they produced. And the farmer didn't have to buy the seeds from Monsanto first because the American people decide wheat seeds are free. Well, we're a long way off from that golden era where work only needs to be done by those who want to. The fact is, we're also no longer in the same place we were in 1938 when the 40-hour work week was established. It's time to start recognizing our surroundings and reacting accordingly. The way to get all of these things done is to support the most left-leaning candidates in your area, because the left are the only ones currently pushing for these policies. At a minimum, vote in the primaries. If you'd like to do more, consider joining the Democratic Socialists of America and possibly even volunteering for the campaign of a politician in your area. And if you find that there are no politicians in your area that are significantly left-leaning, consider running for office yourself. Well, it's true that most politicians these days have a difficult job. I think you'll find being an honest politician as easy as pie.